If you're a player, coach, or parent trying to learn more about football, the quarterback position, navigate recruiting, or determine the landscape of both college and high school football, we got the podcast for you. But before we get going, quick shout out to our sponsors over at Lowney Sports. I've known Tim personally, and he's been a longtime supporter of both youth and high school athletes. He's also an attorney of over 25 years and both an NFL and NIL agent. Many think NIL is expensive, unnecessary, or that it only matters once you have an offer. But there's a lot more to know before the scholarships and deals start coming. To contact him for a free NIL consultation, call 617-733-8313 or visit lowneysports.com.
M2QB Academy is also a Wilson brand affiliate. When you're buying Wilson merchandise, go to the website, click checkout, and plug in our promo code M2QB-456 and save some money with your purchase.
This episode is brought to you by Cantiani Insurance Agency, insurance professionals specializing in home, auto, flood, and investment properties. They are the most referred insurance agency in Massachusetts. If you want coverage you can trust, call 508-791-2088 or visit cantianiagency.com. We also welcome a new sponsor, Wizard Computer Services, providing outsourced IT and cybersecurity since 1997. Call 781-341-2222 or visit www.wizardcpu.com for more information. New England's cybersecurity experts. All right. Special guest on today's podcast, 15-year NFL veteran and host of the Quick Snap podcast, Brian Hoyer. Brian, thanks for joining.
What's up, fellas? And M2 students slash thrower, whatever you want to call me. I mean, how many sessions did I come to, Mike, when I was getting ready to go play for the Raiders and I needed someone to throw to? So I've been in these kids' shoes, so to speak.
Absolutely. No, that was the kids got so much out of it. It was just such an awesome opportunity for them. And us as coaches too, we learned a ton. And then don't forget you did the film work as well. So
That's right.
On the staff. So
yeah,
a lot of different elements. So Brian, first of all, thanks for joining us. I know obviously really busy schedule, but our kids will get a ton out of this. When people hear your name, they think 15-year NFL career, a guy that started for 8 different teams, which is the second most in league history. But when you think back to your football journey, like where did it begin for you? So you're thinking like early on, where did you fall in love with the game? Who were some of your early influences, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, so from the earliest football memories I can have was watching the Cleveland Browns. So my dad is from Germany. He had no allegiance to any college football. I watched zero college football until I started probably getting recruited to play football. We were a Cleveland Browns family, and then they left and broke my heart when I was 10 years old in 1995. So I remember Bernie Kosar, which, one of the greatest things about becoming the quarterback of my hometown Cleveland Browns, one of the first messages I get was Bernie Kosar, which is so cool to me. I remember him playing. I remember, Webster Slaughter. These guys, your guys are never going to know who these guys are, but like Ozzie Newsome, who was a tight end when I was young. And for me, and this is where, and I can speak on this as a parent as well. I think this is what's a little lost on our kids these days. How many times I went out in my backyard or the park and threw on my Browns jersey and just played football with the boys.
Yeah.
Like literally, and Garrett, my son, because he's worked with you. And one of the coolest moments that I've seen in his football journey was at Zavarian. They had a little flag football tournament that they saw, like the kids had to organize. They signed everything up, and I showed up, and I was like, I was just smiling ear to ear, and I realized what it was. I never had seen him do that before, where it was like, let's let the kids figure it out. They come up with the plays. Like I used to do that every day in the fall after school, and then I would eventually, that turned into flag football, and then I remember playing for the North Olmsted Eagles, 5th grade tackle football back in Ohio. Like, that was my earliest memory of playing. And like I said, my dad was not this big football fan, and he knew I could throw. I wanted to play receiver because all my favorite players were receivers. Michael Irvin, Deion Sanders, who went 2 ways. He was also a baseball player. And I wanted to be a receiver, but no one could throw me the football. And I had a good arm, so that's how I got stuck at quarterback. And then my dad used to watch Steve Spurrier coach the Florida Gators and would try to like replicate plays, and then we would try to run them in sixth grade football.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think back to like even when I was in middle school and we were at the high school games and just playing
Yeah,
alongside while the game's going on, playing tackle football. And like those are some of the best memories and where you kind of build that foundation.
yeah.
Now, growing up in Ohio playing football, that's like a pretty big football town, like football state, football area. Just talk about that a little bit, maybe your high school experience. And then when you did start to get recruited and obviously from big time schools. So just talk about
Yeah.
that a little.
So for me, I was a public school kid, but I had this crew of guys that I played baseball with in the summer, and they played for the Catholic schools. So I would always kind of get tagged along with them. And then one time they took me to a St. Ignatius High School, which is, it's a big Catholic high school in Cleveland. They took me to a St. Ignatius playoff game at the Akron Rubber Bowl, and there was 30,000 people there to watch the game. And I walked in and I was like, I want to do this. And I was hooked from that moment on. And now all of a sudden I was going to their camps and I was applying to their school and I got in. And you know, being the quarterback at St. Ignatius is a little bit like being the shortstop for the New York Yankees. Like going back to the 80s, almost every guy who ever started for our program went Division One. A guy that I actually just connected with the other day, Scott Mutrin, actually went to BC. So, it was kind of like this prolific position. And I always tell people the story when I went out for the freshman football team, not JV, not varsity, there were 16 kids going out for quarterback. And so it was kind of one of those things that I knew I wanted to do. And I'll never forget going into those stadiums to watch their games. And then that kind of became the norm. And so I was just telling my trainer the other day, like, I never played a high school football game, probably than fewer than 8,000 people in the stands. So that really prepped you for going on to the next level. And I was also only like the third or fourth junior to ever start there. Usually it was like you had to wait your turn. Now, this is in this day and age, that would be unheard of. You would never be able to make it to college football, but it was almost like you had to wait your turn to be a senior to be the quarterback. So I knew by the time I got to my junior year, won the starting job, had a good season, I was starting to get offers. This is obviously way before NIL and how this all. So you had to go take unofficial visits, and the staffs of the schools wanted to come see you throw in person. And I knew probably midway through my junior year that I was going to have an opportunity to play Division I football. And for me, I was actually, if you look at my careers, I was probably a better baseball player in high school than I was even a football player. And so I didn't really know which way I was going to go. And part of the reason I picked Michigan State was when I got recruited by the football team there, I was also getting recruited by the baseball team. And so I was trying to angle to see if I was going to be able to do both.
What like ultimately made you decide on Michigan State? What were some of those other schools that you had offers to, things like that?
So I had, I think, over like 30 offers. The ones I really narrowed it down to were South Carolina with Lou Holtz. Rest in peace, Lou Holtz, one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Legend.
So that was like, I grew up around these Catholic guys who worship Notre Dame. And he was obviously a great coach. He was at South Carolina. So that was like really, it came down between Michigan State and South Carolina. And what really got me to Michigan State was I wanted to play in the Big Ten. I wanted to play in the Midwest and have my family be able to travel to games. If I go to the SEC and now all of a sudden I'm playing, all these games in Florida and Georgia, and I don't know if my parents would be able to afford to come and watch me play. I really wanted to go to Ohio State, being an Ohio kid, even though I didn't have an allegiance to them, but they had gray shirted the quarterback the year before I got recruited, which basically was reclassing. It was a fancy way of saying reclassing. So they already had him. And then they were also recruiting Brian Brom. I don't know if you remember that name, but he was the number one quarterback in the country. And they kept telling me, like, all right, if he commits to go somewhere else, like, you're our next guy in line. So I kind of held out as long as I could. And then it kind of got to me, like, do I really want to be someone's second choice? And he drew his whole recruitment out until he was one of those guys who signed on signing day. He announced on signing day. So he ended up going to Louisville. So Ohio State didn't even really take a quarterback in my class. But I think had I been offered by them, I probably, being an Ohio kid and they had just won the national championship with Craig Krenzel, like, I think I would have probably gone to Ohio State. But, Michigan State, John L. Smith, who was a little bit of a renegade, he had recruited a quarterback from my high school, probably about 6 years before me, by the name of Dave Ragone, to Louisville. So there was a connection there. He had been recruiting our school heavy, and I was their first choice. And so I wanted to go somewhere where, I felt really wanted, and that's how I ended up there.
And then, so you get to Michigan State, you redshirt as a freshman, play a little bit your sophomore or redshirt freshman year. And then you appeared in 8 games the following year and then starter the final 2 years. At what point did you realize like the NFL was probably a legitimate opportunity for you? Is that something like going into you thought coming out of high school? Or was there a moment at Michigan State when you thought, okay, this can be my lifestyle, my career going forward?
Yeah, there was a point, where so obviously you get to Michigan State, redshirt, I was so skinny. I could not put on weight to save my life. I was like 6'3", like 175, 180 by the time I finished my high school career. So I had to put on a lot of weight. Nowadays, they don't even give a shit about that. It's like, if you could throw it, who cares?
Yeah.
But back then it was like, oh, you don't have the frame, you got to build. So redshirt year was all about trying to put on weight and do it the right way. Then my redshirt sophomore year, I won the backup job, played sparingly. Same thing my sophomore year. We had Drew Stanton there, who was I think Drew was a second round pick. So I think when I saw Drew get drafted and I was playing and I saw me compared to him, and I'll never forget one time being back in Cleveland. I don't know if must have been the summer, around like OTAs, and my dad knew someone, so I was able to go watch practice. And I remember looking over, and I'm in college, so I could throw, and I'm looking at these NFL guys. And I'm like, I can throw just as good, if not better than them. Like, I just got to play and be successful, and I'll have an opportunity. And so, I was a starter at Michigan State as a junior, had a really good year. I actually even submitted. They have this thing in the NFL where if you are an underclassman and you're thinking about entering the draft, they'll give you like a draft grade based on your performance.
Right? Yeah.
And it came back like a 4th round grade. And I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like, if I'm already a 4th rounder, I come back for my senior year. I didn't really think too far into it. My 2 top leading pass catchers both left the NFL draft that year. And so my senior year, I came back, I had a walk-on senior who earned a scholarship, a redshirt freshman, and 2 true freshmen that were my receivers. And my production, we won more games because I was smarter and I played better quarterback, but my production fell off. And I think that's really one of the reasons that led me to go undrafted.
I want to rewind it just a little bit. You talked about playing at a prolific high school and you were a 2-year starter there when the normal was kind of just getting that senior year. Take us through that transition, even from a high school like that into the Big Ten. How did that change for you? Is that, more so the speed of the game or preparation? Kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I think the speed of the game at each level you go up, it just kicks up a notch. And for me, the one thing I would say playing the quarterback position, which is why I played as long as I did, even though I always felt like I had a strong arm, I always felt like I threw with great anticipation. And to me, that's where when you move up the ranks, you can't be a guy who sits there and holds the ball and waits for someone to get open. Because, if this is open in high school, this is open in college, and then this is open in the NFL, and you can't always wait for the perfect look. And I think I would say the high school that I played in prepared me very well because we ran a very pro style, college ready offense. And then actually when I got recruited to Michigan State, they were running the spread. So now all of a sudden I'm in the shotgun, we're throwing the shit out of the ball. Like my first start was the last game of my sophomore year. John L. Smith was going to get fired, and he looked at me. We were playing at Penn State on their senior day. He goes, we're going to try to break every passing record in the history books of Michigan State. And I think I attempted 61 passes in my first collegiate start on the road at Penn State. That it will never be broken at Michigan State, I don't think. It was crazy. It was a close game, but we lost. For me, that being in that spread forced you to have the ball in your hands on every play and throw the football. And then Mark D'Antonio was hired and went back to more of a pro style. We had a fullback. I was under center. So I played in a variety of systems that helped me prepare that. But I think what it was, like, you go in and you're redshirting and now you're scout team. So like, I've always looked at scout team as a place to get better because I'm going to be going against the number 1 defense. And I would say that redshirt year was learning the speed and kind of messing around with, what throws can I get away with? How can I do, how can I layer the football in there? Things like that. That carried over with me even to my NFL career because the first 4 years of my career, that's what I was. I was Tom Brady's backup, and the only reps that I was going to get was a scout team. And that really taught me how to feel the speed of the NFL level. So you feel it in practice first, and then there's no comparison to the game speed. I mean, it's just up another notch. And the thing at the quarterback position is if you can't play with this first, I don't care how skilled you are, because eventually everything catches up to you physically because the guys keep getting better and they keep getting bigger and faster. So that's why your brain has to keep, stay ahead of that and be able to diagnose, okay, the ball snapped, here's what the coverage is, how do I get the ball to the right place, and then anticipate where guys are going to be, if it's zone coverage or whatever it might be.
All in '07, you were all Big Ten. You earned all Big Ten honors. I just want to talk a little bit about off-season preparation going into that season. What did that look like for you? And then I also want to get into kind of week to week in season, what your preparation looked like getting ready for your games on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was a new offense that I had to learn. So I remember, at Michigan State, I'm sure like most colleges, we would stay up there in the summer, take like a course or two because during the season you can't take the full load. So we would stay up there, and I remember just being in the facility and grinding away, trying to meet with the coaches when I could, be in the playbook, watch the film. I would organize our own 7-on-7s because the rules are so strict on what you can do around the coaches. I'm thinking about this now. I remember a 7-on-7 in our indoor facility late at night, and the trainers had left one of their like carts on the side of the sideline. And I remember throwing a high corner to a guy, made an incredible catch, and he had literally had to dive over the cart because we probably weren't aware of our surroundings. I can see it in my mind right now. It was like one of our better receivers. I was like, oh shit. And he literally like somersaulted over it to
right
avoid
over
it. But
the trainer's cart,
yeah,
no less.
yeah, the trainers left that thing out there. But, doing a lot of stuff on our own, that was the best way. Kind of goes back to what I was talking about when you're a kid. Like sometimes you learn the most when you're out there and having to, you don't have the instruction and you can talk it over with your teammates. So there was a lot of that. And then, I actually went to class, unlike these kids now in college. And so during the season, it was tough because you had limited time. And I remember just feeling rushed on everything and then try to catch up by the end of the week. Coaches did a tremendous job. My quarterback coach there, Dave Warner, we'd have extra meetings. Friday night, you'd have your pregame meal, have your team meeting, and then we'd go for a quarterback meeting one more time, go over the plays. Saturday morning, we'd have a signal meeting because we didn't have the coach to quarterback. So we'd have to signal plays in. We'd do that. And, man, it was a whirlwind. But I'll tell you what, when you got to the NFL and it was all you had to focus on, it was the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, it almost
How
makes
important?
it
How
easier in
important
some
is
ways.
that? How important is that skill of like that leadership quality where you're self-run, like for especially for a quarterback, like
It's huge.
the want to.
Yeah.
And then like, how did you is that something that you learned as you went? Is that something that you had from an early age, like leading those backyard football games? Like, how important is it? And then when did you really start to pick up on it and see how valuable it could become?
Yeah, I think it's so important. It's like I was at a session with Mike down in Hanover, and he was trying to get these kids to watch the numbers as they were doing the drills. And like I hear like 1, 2. And finally, like 3 times in, I was like, hold on a second, fellas. Like, you want to be the leader of the team and you can't shout out the number when you're here with Mike? Like,
Opening up
what
a
are we
can of
talking
worms,
about? And so to me, and obviously I'm heavily biased on, as I got older, who I really learned a lot from was Tom Brady. And so you see Tom now, and what does he talk about? Physically and like skills wise, the quarterbacks now are so far ahead of where we were. Like even my son, and he's got a long way to go. Mike, you know that you work with him. He's so far more advanced than where I was at his age because he's been doing it from a younger age. I think the coaching is better. Like it was my dad, like, watching TV and saying, do this. Like I didn't have a real quarterback coach until I got to high school, and it was just the quarterback coach of the high school. Like there was no M2 academy. There was nothing like that. So I think the kids are overly physically prepared, but when it comes to the mental and emotional side, and so Alex, like you're talking about, how important is it to be the quarterback and be the leader of not only the offense, but of the team ultimately. And if you don't have that confidence to go out there and do that, and some of it is, I would say you're born with it, it's God-given, and some of it can be learned. And I was able to watch a lot of great leaders along the way, and you try to figure out what your own leadership style is. And I would say it actually gets easier the further you go because you get around more like-minded people. Like being a leader in high school is hard, especially if you want aspirations to go play at the next level. Well, that's not everybody on your team's aspirations. And so when they want to go out and drink after the game on Saturday night and you're worried about the game next week, like you might take a lot of shit for that. I know I did. Yeah. But I know that I went to the next level and those guys didn't. And so I think the hardest thing is usually this is how it goes is being the leader is actually the hardest part to do. And how do you build those skills? Well, you self-organize. You get people out there doing things when the coaches aren't around. You got to figure it out. You, for me, there was nothing greater than the first 3 years to just be in the room and watch how Tom Brady approached everything. How the meetings went, he dictated everything. He turned around to the receivers and said, "I don't want you to do that. When you run this route, it's got to be like this." When he was out on the field, I mean, he demanded so much out of everyone. And so for me, I always tried to emulate that. Now, he's a special, rare breed who was able to, I think one of his greatest qualities that not a lot of people get to see because it's not on the field, it's his emotional connection to different guys. He knew the guys that he could chew out, like Julian Edelman, like Gronk. And he knew some of the guys that if he did that to them, they could break. So he'd put his arm around them and say, hey, babe, like when you run this route, I need you to do this. And you never really saw him get mad with those guys because he knew who could take it and who couldn't. And also, I think, he just talked about, you know, he rather would lead with love than try to be leading with fear. And so I think that ultimately, now look, Bill Belichick led with fear, and that worked for a long time too. So it's like everybody's got to be themselves. But I think to the point, and what you're asking me is, there's so much more to playing quarterback than the physical skills on the field. Unlike any other position, I would say in all of sports, it takes a different. You're really different from everybody else on the field, and that's the way it has to be if you want to be successful, in my opinion. I mean, if you look back at the Super Bowl winners of just the last 10 years, you would say, yeah, they're all great players, but they're all phenomenal leaders. Even what Sam Darnold did this past year, incredible leader. Like the guys respected the hell out of him, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with his journey and how he got to that point.
Yeah, without a doubt.
100%.
And we preach that to our kids all the time with like every session, right? There's a physical aspect to it, but the mental and emotional, like you can train that. Like I truly believe like you can get better at organizing, communicating, working together, body language, leadership skills, like,
and you have to get better at feeling uncomfortable because
absolutely.
you have to, trust me, the first time you got to call someone out, it's uncomfortable. But if and that's the other thing, like you better know better than everyone else what their job is, because you better not call someone out and have them be wrong. Like one of the coolest stories I read from last year, now that I cover media, you see these things, was at like one of the first OTAs down in Tampa, Emeka Egbuka came in and was lined up in a spot. And Baker was like, no, 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 come down, come down. He's like, nope, this is where I'm supposed to be. And Baker was recalling what the spot was from last year's offense. They had made some changes, and Emeka knew it. And he was like, damn, like I better be on top of it. If the rookie knows it, like that's the thing is if you're going to play quarterback, you better know more than everybody else. So that way, when you call someone out, you better be right.
And that made me think of another thing with you when you used to train with us, which I thought was a cool aspect of like adding the mental side to training is with whatever route and whatever drill we were doing, you would tie it to a concept against a certain defense. And I'm going to throw it this way this time. And then this time I'm going to throw it versus a different look. And I think that's a way that in training, in a training setting, that you can also really work on the mental as well and tie it to your offense and, tie it to defensive recognition and things like that. So,
yeah, I think I learned early, maybe in college, but definitely by the time I got to New England, was you don't just go to throw. Like I don't just call a slant and think, all right, it's a slant. No, I'm thinking, what concept is it? Am I reading diagonal to slant? Is it two slants? Do I have to wait for second window? Like there's so many scenarios that you can train in your head. And I think that a lot of that probably too was having to be a backup early in my career. Like you ain't going to get very many reps. So when I get a rep, even if it's just routes on air, I'm trying to visualize what the play is. Where's the linebacker? Where's the curl flat? Is he getting depth? Okay. All of those things. And so when I was with you, there was very specific plays that I would work on. So like if guys were going to run, this deep in cut, well, I wasn't just going to drop back and throw a deep in cut. Like one time I was going to go like it was drop back pass and we had two jam protections and I could get depth. And the other time I was going to do a play action one. Like and I would recommend this at any level. If you are running routes and on air, don't just think of the guy as a single person. Think of a play concept in your offense that has that route and then visualize what you would do on that play.
Yeah, I think there's so much value to that. And you get so many mental reps, like you said, with it. It doesn't have to always be the physical rep with the full team around you. So that's so valuable, I think, for all kids to hear. Going back a little bit, I want to get a lot into the NFL stuff, but just quickly, like, you finish up at Michigan State, you get into the pre-draft process. Obviously, like you said, you had a 4th round grade coming out of your junior year. Give us like a little bit of insight. The season ends. What did that pre-draft process look like back then? And then just, you got invited to the NFL Combine. Can you give us like an insider's perspective of what happens in that experience when you get there?
Like, man, I'm really feeling old because I got to really think back. So I played in our bowl game. We played Georgia. Somehow I got the luck of the draw in my both bowl games that I played in. My junior year, we played Matt Ryan, who was the first quarterback drafted in the draft. And then my senior year, we played Matt Stafford. So it's like, we're going against the top quarterback in each year, both close games, but we lost. I played terrible in the BC game, but no, literally like played the game, flew back from Orlando to Michigan State, got in my car, and then drove all the way straight to New Jersey to start training. That's where my agent sent people. There's a place called Test right there in New Jersey, right by Rutgers, and immediately like living with a lineman from Penn State who was one of my agent's clients as well. I got a roommate there, and it was just all about training. It was wake up, breakfast, go into the facility, do training, have like for me at the quarterback position, I actually met with Tim Hasselback. He kind of prepped me on interview process, all of those things. That's who my coach was for that. Have meet with him, have lunch, then go do on-field training. And it was just, honestly, for me, it was the greatest thing ever. It was like, this is what I get to do with my life. I'm going to go and train for football and get prepped and get ready to go to the combine. And then, the combine is just a whirlwind itself because they fly you in, you're poked, prodded, all your medical. Luckily for me, I didn't really have any injuries at Michigan State, so mine was pretty clean and simple. And then they get you up at like 3 a.m. to do a drug test because they want to see how you respond and get down there. And then you maybe go back to sleep for an hour, then you're back at it. And so, for me, I was going to throw at the combine and felt like I did pretty well. I'm not the greatest athlete, but I did well on all my times. I think biggest shocker was like a 32.5-inch vertical, which was probably one of my best numbers.
Bunnies.
But yeah. And, and then after that, it was really, and then obviously meet with the teams. I don't know if they still do it this way, but it was pretty cool. They had like this old train station and they'd have these tables set up, all the different teams. And it was kind of like speed dating. So you'd get like 10 minutes with the Denver Broncos and then you'd be meeting. Okay, thanks. Nice to meet you. And then the clock would ding and then you'd go to your next scheduled meeting, whoever requested you. And then you would have, some of the meetings where they were more in depth, where you go to the hotel room and they'd get you up on the board and, all right, draw your favorite play from Michigan State and how you were successful on it. And, what were you reading? So you had to be on top of that stuff. And then obviously the skills on the field testing. And then after that, went back to New Jersey, continued to train, get ready for pro day, had my pro day at Michigan State and, felt really good with it. 2 teams stayed afterwards and really sat down with me because they can do even further extensive meetings there at your school. The Carolina Panthers is one of them and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So an hour with Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator, watching some of my film, asking me questions. Same thing with Jacksonville and their quarterback coach. And then after that, they can schedule individual workouts. So I remember one, I'll never forget this, and I still talk to this guy all the time, Bill O'Brien. He was the offensive coordinator of the Patriots. He came and worked me out. And he was putting me through this workout, and I was like, there's no way that these are NFL throws. Like, he would have me rolling out right and then throwing like a 25-yard comeback all the way back to the left sideline. And I was like, this is a real play. And I think, he'd be like, yeah, Brady just ran the last year, 258 max, X squirrel. Then I get there and like everything when you roll out right, nothing's back, but they want to see your arm strength. They want to see you move, get your feet planted. So, all of that. And then, once all the work's done, now it's just, that's the anxious part. And for me, I felt really confident I was going to get drafted somewhere between the 3rd and 5th round. At least that's what my agent had heard. Really, he goes, Carolina says they're not going to let you drop past the 5th round. They want to draft you. So he's like, if that's the case, I can get ESPN to come to your house and like, they'll be there and the moment will be filmed. I'm like, yeah, great. Awesome. So 3rd round comes, nothing. 4th round, nothing. 5th round, Carolina's on the clock. I'm waiting for my phone to ring, nothing. 6th round, the Jacksonville quarterback coach calls me. He's like, hey, we got 2 picks left. I'm going to try to make sure you're one of them, blah, blah, blah. 6th round, nothing. 7th round, nothing. So the draft
Crazy.
ends and you're like, what the hell? And then, of course, your phone starts blowing up because there's teams that want you as an undrafted free agent. So I had like 8 teams calling me all at once. And that's where I really leaned on my agent. He goes, look, I think you should go to New England, which I thought he was crazy because obviously they had Tom. He's coming off his ACL injury. They had Kevin O'Connell, who they just drafted the year before, and they had Matt Gutierrez, who had been here for a long time. And he goes, trust me, like I got a good relationship with Bill, with Nick Casario. They really like you. I think you should go there. Worst case scenario, practice squad, and you're in the room with Tom Brady every day. I'm like, all right, great. Just little by little chipped away at it. And all of a sudden, I'm the last man standing behind Tom, and I was his backup, and it was just us two for that whole year.
No, that's
Incredible.
wild. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like going into a Patriots program where they're coming off 3 Super Bowls. You got a dynasty in the making, if not already. You're going to one of the greatest coaches of all time with probably the best quarterback of all time. What's it like stepping into that quarterback room and into that facility with that kind of history? That must have been absolutely nuts, especially coming out undrafted.
And as I told you before, like I'm a Cleveland kid. Well, who was the coach of the Cleveland Browns when I was there was Bill Belichick. So like I already knew a lot about Bill before, even the Super Bowls. And so, I was excited. I didn't maybe because I was disappointed with how the draft went and I looked at the depth chart, I kind of played pretty freely. I kind of was like soaking it all in and Billy, even to this day, he would talk about, he's like, I don't know how you remembered the plays like you did. And I said, well, what I would do, me and actually it was my roommate when was training for the draft. His name was Rich Orenberger. He ended up getting drafted by the Patriots. So we were roommates again. And then Julian Edelman was, a 7th round pick or whatever it was, 6th round, whatever, 7th round. And the 3 of us would go back every night and we would walk through every single play on the install for the next day in our hotel room. Like call the play in the huddle, simulate going to the line. Julian would line up. Rich would snap the ball because he played center and guard. And then I would pitch it to Julian and we'd come back and do it again. And for me, I learned early because the plays were a lot wordier than what I was used to, that if I just learned the concepts and banked on the players knowing where to line up, at least I would know what they were doing. Now, there was a few times where Julian would look at me and I'd be like, said, Hut, like, you better know what to do because I know what the words told me you're supposed to do, but I'm not sure where you're supposed to line up yet. I couldn't take all that information in that quickly because you come to rookie minicamp, you do your physical, you have night meetings, and you're on the field the next morning at 7 a.m. Like they want to see how you respond, how you learn. It's a whirlwind. And I think for me, I just took it day by day and those walkthroughs at the Residence Inn at the back of Foxborough where we would go back to every night and just try to do as much as I could to prepare myself.
That's wild.
That's good stuff.
And I know we had Trace McSorley on a few weeks ago, and he talked about one of the differences between college and the NFL was like you almost have more time in terms of like you're not going through class early on in your career. Like, what's the day to day kind of look like for you guys as you're going through that process?
Well, I always tell people this story. Like in college, particularly Michigan State with Mark D'Antonio, like things were very regimented. Like you really didn't have. I'm talking about like let's talk about 48 hours leading up to game time. Like you had meetings and then you went to the hotel and then you had team dinner and then there was really no free time. Well, then you get to the NFL and like Trace was saying, you have all this time in the world. Like I'll never forget my first preseason game was a night home game and we had our meeting at like 10 a.m. at the hotel and they're like, all right, see you guys at 6, like be at the stadium at 6. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with myself? Like I honestly didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I remember just like sitting in my hotel room all day, like going over plays, being like, I shouldn't like go do anything else. It's game day. And so those are all things you learn along the way. You lean on the veterans, all of that. But, once I made the team, I can't think, it's like too much to remember the off season. Obviously spent a lot of time at the Residence Inn with those guys. But I know once I got to the season, I basically adapted Tom's routine because that's who I was following. And so, you had Mondays was obviously review of the game the day before, and you'd have meetings, all of those things, watch the film, and then we would start to get ahead on the upcoming opponent. So we'd watch a game or 2 of that. On Tuesdays, which is the players' day off, we'd come in and we'd have a meeting with Bill Belichick, and we'd go over every single defensive back on the upcoming opponent the week that we were going to play. So strong points, weak points, overall summary of each guy. We'd go through every single guy, and then we'd watch film, maybe 10 clips of each guy. So we would know the player, not necessarily the scheme. Okay, this guy's a little quicker than fast. This guy's long. Don't want to throw go balls on him. You take all those notes. And then once you got to Wednesday, it was basically self-explanatory, right? You had all of your normal workday. So come in, team meeting, offensive meeting, skill guy meeting, quarterback meeting, walk through, lunch, practice, come in, watch film. And then afterwards, you would use that time to get ahead on the next day. So Wednesdays are first and second down. Thursday is basically third down and maybe 2 minute. And then Friday is the red area and then a review of the whole week. So once you get in it, I mean, it is going fast and you think you have all this time, but our average day at New England would start at a team meeting at 7:30 and you'd be done at 6. So, I would try to lift before that, before the team meeting, because there was not going to be any time to do it during the day and you had to get it in. And then when you were done with meetings at 5:30, you're trying to get another hour. And this is before we had iPads that we could take home. So if you were going to watch film, you have basically stayed at the facility. So you're putting in, 12-hour days, if that, depending on, what day of the week it is.
Yeah, that's a lot. And obviously for you, so helpful learning from Tom and Bill and just their habits. How was the banter in that like meeting room with Tom and Bill?
No banter. No banter. No, it was a lot of, I mean, for me, and you guys, this is a funny story that I always tell. So those Tuesday meetings, I didn't say shit because it was Bill going over the players, Tom making a comment of what he felt like, throwing the film. And I probably said 10 words the first, I don't know, 12 weeks of the season. So then it was in December. I know it was in December and I'm there on Tuesday and I'm sitting in the room we always meet at like noon and no one's there. Now it's like 12:10. No, I'm like, did they switch the meeting? So I go down to Bill's assistant and I go, are we still meeting today? And he's like, well, Tom's wife's in labor. They're waiting to see if the baby's born, if he's going to be able to make it down here, which I'm thinking like, he's going to come to this Tuesday meeting after his child's born. Like, what are we talking? He's like, let's just give it another hour. So I went in and, watched film, did whatever. And I'm sitting in the room and Bill walks in. He's like, all right, let's just you and I do this. Doesn't sound like he's coming. So now I'm nervous as hell. Like, what am I going to say? And I knew what we were watching, but all I could keep thinking about, all right, what are the cliche terms that we use for defensive back? So we're watching like three guys and he's like, what do you think of so-and-so? I'm like, oh, and the first thing that came to my mind was, which Bill used a lot, was, quicker than fast. So I'm like, he's, quicker than fast guy. And Bill's like, I wouldn't really agree with that. Maybe I'll just do the talking from here on out. And that's how the rest of the meeting went. So when you ask about banter, now I will say, when I came back in 2017, obviously come back as a veteran player, have played a lot of football on my own, and it was a different dynamic. And so in some of these meetings, and we would meet with Bill on Saturday mornings too, while the whole team was doing special teams. And sometimes Tom would be like, can you just get him like talking about something so we don't have to sit here with him and have him go over things for the next 45 minutes. So I always knew Bill, if I could get him talking about Cleveland, like he would talk for 30 minutes, like about Art Modell, who was the owner, or, how it ended up, like the team moved in the middle of the year, so that was always my back pocket. Like, hey, Bill, when you coached in Cleveland, like, what was that like when the team just got announced that it was moving? And then he would go for 25 minutes. And then the next thing we know, Josh McDaniels would be like, all right, I need these guys back for the offensive meeting. And Bill would be like, oh shit, I didn't even do, the tape we were going to do. So like that was like the extent of the banter, was me trying to basically delay, whatever the meeting was going to be by asking Bill questions about Cleveland Browns.
It's great stuff.
Yeah.
Behind the curtain a little bit, like the Tom and Bill, like in those meetings, obviously you said Bill's talking, Tom's talking, and everybody else is silent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did they, similar to like what you experienced with Bill there, like when they disagreed, what was that like? Was it kind of like just two giants coming at each other? Or was it more so like?
No, it was very
kind of understanding,
very thoughtful. It was very thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I think they both, Bill, I think, had the utmost admiration for how Tom saw the game. So I don't really actually remember Tom saying something and Bill really not disagreeing with him. And Bill was, I think one of his great skill sets was he was willing to listen to anybody if they had something that he thought could be beneficial, whether it was to the offense, the defense, the team. And so I think, and he's talked about it, like he made Tom's preparation made Bill be more prepared. You know what I mean? Because he never wanted to go into a meeting with Tom
Yeah.
and not have an answer to something. And so for me, like you talk about, you know, being able to be a fly in the wall and have a PhD. I mean, I witnessed conversations about how are we going to affect Ed Reed? How like just between those two guys, like not many other people got an opportunity to do it, and no one did it as long as I did. So it was always really cool. Now, I mean, we all know the infamous stories of Bill calling Tom out in team meetings. You talk about like a welcome to the NFL moment. I remember the first day after our first team OTAs, we come in and we always knew it was going to be not a great meeting when you came in the team meeting and all of a sudden the lights went off because that was when Bill was going to run the film. We called it the low lights. And the first clip he threw up was Tom trying to throw a seam to Welker down the left sideline, and he was like, "Now, why would you try to throw a seam to the smallest guy in the field? It's trying to like hit an ant 40 yards down the field." So he's coming after Welker, he's coming after Brady, and I remember thinking like, I don't have a chance if that's the standard and I'm just an undrafted rookie, like, but it was Bill's way and Tom, embraced it was no one's above anybody else. And so Tom was able to handle it and Bill used that to put everybody else on notice. And I think that was another unique leadership quality. And I would say this, he's the greatest player of all time, but he's also the greatest teammate of all time. He always dished out success to everybody else, and he always, always took accountability. You never saw Tom, even if someone screwed up, which I knew when they did, he would always put it on himself. And I think that when you talk about leadership as a quarterback, and we're so consumed with what people think about us, you got to be secure enough to always take the blame and always dish out the success.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. Like we talk about all the time, the success in adversity is going to define you, right? How you handle success, how you handle adversity, and being able to shoulder the load, right? When things don't go well. So I think that's a great point. So obviously you played for 9 different teams. How much did that foundation in New England, you think, help you to stick in the league for as long as you did and go on to have success at other places?
It was huge. I mean, you talk about preparation and being ready for when you get a moment. And I think this is always such a funny story, but my first start in Cleveland came in week 3 or week 4 because Brandon Weeden was our starter. He hurt his thumb and I was going to get to play. And I was like, all right, I'm going to run this week like I'm Tom Brady. I'm going to pull people aside. I'm going to do all those things. And Tom would always have these notes that he would accumulate during the week. And then once the offensive meeting was done on Saturday nights, he would kind of address everybody with what his thoughts were, whether it was specific to them or a past concept. So I did that. And I remember Joe Thomas later being like, he said he was sitting there thinking like, who does this guy think he is? Like his first start, he just got here. He's running this. And we won the game. And then he's like, after we won the game, I was like, well, you were so prepared and that's how you did it. And so to me, like if I had got drafted by Carolina, I bet my career lasts 4 years. They weren't a great franchise. Their coaches got fired. I wouldn't have learned what I learned. I wouldn't have been around the people I was around. And that was Bill O'Brien too. He was, crucial in my development because he would spend, he didn't really have to coach Tom. He developed the offense and the game plan. But when he was coaching me. And so I would say being around Tom, being around Billy and doing those things. And then when I finally got my chance, wherever it was, I was like, well, I'm going to just do it how the greatest of all time does it. You know what I mean? That's just now I wasn't the same player as him, but I was still trying to do that day in, day out and kind of keep that mentality with me.
Yeah. And for a decent amount of your career, right, you were a backup. How hard is it? Like people say, oh, greatest job in the world. And I think it is. But at the same time, you always have to be ready, right? At a moment's notice, you don't barely get to warm up. Boom, you're thrown in the game and you got to react like you're the starter. What kind of pressure comes with that? And then you talked about it a little bit already, but like, how do you mentally stay locked in and continue to prepare like you're the starter when you're not?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I thought being a backup was harder than being the starter. I mean, it's just because you don't get the reps, you don't know if you're going to go in. And honestly, Sundays was more nerve-wracking sitting on the sideline watching the play and then checking the quarterback. Is he up? Is he down? And for me, it only happened twice in my career where I had to go into a game. Oddly enough, it was for Jacoby Brissett and for Jimmy Garoppolo. So it was like two New England guys that I ended up backing up, and now all of a sudden they both go down. The amount of blacking out that goes on when that happens, like you know what to do.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
remember looking back and being like, I was on like autopilot. You're reverting back to what you've prepared and what you know because the adrenaline that spikes in you. I mean, when you're a starter, you know you're playing all week, so the adrenaline spike never really. I mean, it just kind of gradually builds. When the starting quarterback goes down, and they're like, "Hey, warm up," you're like, "I've been sitting over here for an hour and a half, not really doing anything. I'm paying attention to the game, but like physically." And then you all of a sudden you go out and you're having to throw the football. I had to go in one time when I think it was like third down. So it's like you don't even get a first down play to like get your
Yeah.
feet wet. So for me, when I was a backup early in my career, I would always play the play in my mind as it was going on. So I very rarely watched the quarterback. I was watching the defense and I'd say, okay, they just played cover two Tampa. Where am I throwing the football? And then, either I would think it would go one place and it would go there, or the Tom would throw it somewhere else. And then I'd question, well, why did he throw it there? So I'd play the game in my head the whole time. And there's a lot of playing in my game in the head, playing in my head, the games, because I never went in.
Yeah.
And then when you're playing, like you have all the preparation and you're just trying to navigate, game day and what that is. So it's two very different things. And then I would say later in my career, after having played a lot of football, it wasn't so nerve-wracking anymore. Like I was like, all right, if I go in, I know what to do. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. But early in your career, when you're a backup and you haven't had that chance to play a lot of football, like that can be pretty nerve-wracking.
Now, do you think that was the mindset of like most guys, or do you think that was something that separated you? Because I think it's hard being the backup and still like mentally, right? That's a challenge to stay locked in and, like you said, go through each rep and kind of mentally process it. Do you think that's kind of in the NFL, that's the norm, or is that what kind of separated you and made you stick for as long as you did?
Yeah, I don't think I was the norm by any means, but I also think that was because of who my head coach was. So there was times even in regular season games, I think it was my second year, we were playing Miami towards the end of the year and we'd already kind of secured our playoff spot. So I knew I was going to play, but I thought it would be like in the second half. And all of a sudden it's like second quarter, second down, and in my helmet I hear Bill O'Brien's like, "Hoy, you're in." They just threw me in without any prep. They were trying to simulate the quarterback going down. And so here it is. So like when Bill Belichick's your head coach and he does that every day in practice, you don't know what rep you're going to get if you get any. So for me, it was like you always have to be locked in and be prepared. Like I was never the quarterback on the sideline with a baseball hat on and an earpiece in. I kept my helmet on, so I was listening to play in my helmet and I was ready to go. I wasn't going to be the guy scrambling for his helmet if the starter went down.
I always notice that. I'm a big time Pats fan, Brian. I mean, to a
Yeah.
fault. I'm still recovering after the Super Bowl this year, but
Yeah.
I always remember
Yeah,
that
we
watching.
big free agency signings, man. I feel
Yeah,
good about him.
I do too. I do too. Growing up, it was, I remember watching you and Brady running out of the tunnel, and then
Yeah.
what you just said. I remember they panned to the sideline, and you were always ready to go. But kind of changing gears a little bit. I'm having a tough time here because I'm like looking at you, and then I'm looking at the Lombardi behind you, and I'm like getting all fired up here. I just want to reach out and grab it. I mean, shit. I haven't played a meaningful snap of football in 8 years, and I still want to win one of those things. But kind of talking about that, obviously the one you were a part of in the 18-19 season, that Super Bowl win against the Rams, you got a front row seat, and you were heavily a part of that Super Bowl championship team. And I know you talked about the meetings and Brady's leadership style when it came to loving on the guys and everything like that, but what are some other things that it takes? Everybody wants to win a Super Bowl. Everybody wants to be a champion. But what are some of the things that it takes from the quarterback room to actually make it happen, other than the stuff we already talked about, the meetings, the leadership style? Like what is some other things that come to mind when you think of what it takes to win at the highest level?
Yeah. I mean, from the quarterback position, you can never put your team in harm's way. I think Tom was the best at doing that. Belichick, when he had his retirement uh, ceremony at Gillette. He said Tom was the greatest at avoiding bad plays, which you don't think about that, right? We all think about how do I have the good plays? I think as a quarterback, you have to figure out the best way to avoid a bad play because inevitably, if you play 60 to 65 snaps on offense, the defense is going to do something 20 to 25 times that if you make the wrong decision, you put the ball in harm's way, you go backwards. We saw that. I mean, look, let's just call it what it is. We're all here in New England in the Super Bowl. I actually, when I watched the film, like the coaches' tape, they had a lot of plays that went forward, but they had far
Yeah.
too many plays that went backwards. And that was
100%.
what really hurt them. And Tom was just, he was the best at that. And I would say when the Chiefs have won the Super Bowls, Mahomes has been incredible at that. When
Yeah.
Stafford won the Super Bowl, he was the same way. And Darnold, when they won this past year, I mean, he got close. Marcus Jones almost took him pick six on the first drive, but he didn't do that. And so, we all sit there and when you're thinking about playing quarterback, you dream of, the post for 60-yard touchdown, or you dream of fitting in the slant off the ear hole of the flat defender and all those things. But it's the boring stuff. It's the monotonous stuff. Like Tom, a play would be called and the defense would present a look. And if he ran the play, it might be a 1-yard gain. But if he knew that the safety was blitzing and it wasn't a good play, he was not going to run the play. I'm just, and he's talked about this. Like, those are the little things at the quarterback position that you can do that puts your team in the best position to win. And one of the greatest sayings that I learned in my career from Bill was, you can't win until you keep from losing. And it's a very basic thing, but most games in the NFL are lost than they are won. That's just my opinion. The
Yeah.
talent's too good. The coaches are all good. And ultimately what it comes down to in the majority of games is one team loses it more than the other team wins it. And that all, whether we like it or not, we pick the position to play quarterback. We touch the ball on every single play. So it's on us more than anybody out there on the field that's going to have an effect on the game. So there's that. And then I think, going back to what we talk about preparation and, mental and emotional awareness and how you use that to relate to your teammates, make sure that people know that you work, but don't boast about it, right? No one wants to see someone who's putting all their clips on Instagram but then really they know that it's just for the show. The best guys work in silence and the team sees it and they don't need to brag about it. And then ultimately it's just accountability, right? Like, always be accountable. I think that's what made the Patriots dynasty what it was there was so much accountability, not from player to coach, but from player to player. And that all started with, the great leadership, not just Tom, but guys like Teddy Bruschi and Kevin Falk and Matt Light. And then it went on to be like, Edelman and the McCourties and Slater and Dante Hightower, like, and those young guys learned from those old guys, and it kind of became like full circle. So I know that's a lot, but there's the on-field stuff and then there's the off-field stuff. And I think it's being the hardest worker, knowing the offense better than anybody else, being accountable to one another and holding people accountable, which comes with leadership, right? When you see the guys aren't doing the right things, are you going to have the courage to call them out? And it's not always the cool thing to do. That's why I said
Yeah.
it gets easier as you get higher, because the higher up you get, the less people that aren't going to do the right thing. That's
Yeah.
what to me, it's hard in high school. It's harder in high school than it is at the NFL
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. I agree. So you talk about preparation. Can you take us inside the film room a little bit? Like, you played for 9 different teams, so many different systems, learn from some of the best around. Like, I think kids just watch film to watch film sometimes. Like, can you give us some inside info on like how you watch film or things you learned over the years? You turn on the tape. What are you looking at? What's your process going through that?
Yeah, it all depends on the day and what the purpose is. So, like, in a typical week, you're going to watch your game from the day before. You're going to have corrections. You're going to learn, okay, I like that. I didn't like that. I thought this was this coverage. It wasn't, or, that's exactly what I thought it was. And when I watched the film, it shows up exactly how I remembered it. And then once that was passed, I would usually watch a game or two of the upcoming opponent and not really dive deep into, I don't want to say I watched it like as a fan, but it was kind of like, let me just watch this game. I'm not really going by situation. I'm just going to watch the game in its entirety and let it run out. So first, second, third, whatever it was, you watch a game or two just to get a feel. Then on Tuesdays, we were lucky because we would have this breakdown with Bill, so we would, and this is, once I left New England, I just did this on my own. I didn't, the other coaches weren't doing it, but I would do it on my own. It's how I did it my whole career. So now I'm getting to know the players. I'm getting to know what they do really well. How do they play when it's zone coverage? Do they turn their shoulders in or they turn them out? Like, you're getting feels for the actual player. And then also on Tuesdays was a big day to watch explosive plays, pass plays around the league. That's what we like to do. It's a copycat league. So, you'd throw on, early in my career, we'd watch a lot of Drew Brees in New Orleans. We'd watch a lot of Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. We'd watch Phillip Rivers with the Chargers. Like, we'd watch Peyton. We would watch, and we're lucky because the scouting department, you can go on and write, plays over 20 yards from last week, and they'd have all of them.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be able to watch, hey, let's see if we can get this in. We like this, and then we would take it to the offensive coordinator, and sometimes Josh would be like, great, I love it. How are you going to block, Myles Garrett on the edge on that play? And you're like, didn't think about that one, Like, that's where the coach was great at figuring out what could work and what couldn't. But, and to me, you learn a lot from watching guys who play your position. So that's really what Tuesdays was, you know, get to know the personnel, look for plays that you can really maybe try to pull from. And then Wednesdays was a lot of first and second down. So now you're getting into cutups. Now I want to know on first and second down, if we put our base offense out there and they have base defense, like, what are the percentages of the coverages that they're going to run, or blitzes? Do they blitz from an underfront or an overfront? Like, you're getting into cutups and trying to find, this is where like analytics really comes into it, right? So this is tough for a high school kid. I don't know if they have
Yeah.
this on Huddle, but we're breaking it down, and we used to get it to a point where in football is a game of percentages. So you would say, all right, on first down versus and they're in base defense, 60% blitz one, it's 30% cover two, and then it's 10% cover three. And so you're trying to do process of elimination so that when the ball's snapped, you have a pretty good indication of one of those three things it's going to be. And then after Wednesday's practice, you watch practice, put it to bed. Now I'm starting to watch third down cutups and really breaking it down: 3rd and 2 to 5, 3rd and 6 to 9, 3rd and 10 plus, and then you're watching 2 minutes. So as the week goes on, you kind of watch whole games. This is just how I learned how to do it: whole games, players, cut ups, situational cut ups, and then obviously after Thursday's practice, you get into red area and goal line. I guess, goal line was pretty simple, and then once practice was over on Friday, you were like, to me, that was like you had to take a break mentally. So you would end practice. We wouldn't have meetings after practice. You'd get out of there like 1, 2 o'clock. That was like date night, go home, maybe look over the game plan one more time. We're just talking about film, but as I'm going through the whole week, I'm going over the game plan. I like these plays in this situation. You're kind of pairing the game plan with the film you're watching. And then Saturday was more rewatch, maybe one of the most recent games that the team played. Again, kind of how I did in the first week. See if I can find any, if they have a big play, do they come with a blitz? You want to watch them sequentially. If I hit a big pass on them, is this defensive coordinator likely to be reactive and send a blitz? Or if we get a sudden change, are they playing really soft, expecting us to throw a shot? And then we would have meeting on Saturday with Bill, and it would be kind of like his parting wisdom on what he thought about the game. And then at that point, it was the film was really put away, and I was just always narrowing down the call sheet. And we had these amazing call sheet meetings when I was in New England. No one else really did it the way we did, but we would go over every single play, and the starter would go through every single play. He would talk about, this is the mic point, and if it was a pass play, this is the read. And if it's an alert, this is what it's an alerted for. So we'd be in there for 30, 40 minutes. And sometimes we do it 4 times. If it was like a Sunday night football game, like Tom would want to do it. And while they're doing it, they're adding more plays as they go or taking plays out. So it really was, up until 6 hours before kickoff, like, it was always a work in progress.
Wow.
It's crazy. Like, people watch the game on Sunday, but they don't realize how
Yeah.
much really goes into
gosh.
every week.
And that's why, to me, like, having played in all these different systems, what Tom accomplished with the amount of stuff that he was asked to do, no one was asked to do more than Tom on the field. And I've been in the system that Peyton played in and Montana, and like, there was more freedom and more responsibility on the quarterback in the New England Patriots. And we saw it with Drake May this year. Like, people want to get away from it because it's hard to do and it's hard to teach. But if you can do it and you can be good at it, to me, there's no better way to play the position.
Yeah, it's an
Talk about
advantage. But
Yeah, advantages. I think importance wise, like Tom and Drake and the knowledge of the game. So like in our scenario for high school kids, a lot of them, I mean, I went to go play for Mike my freshman year of college, and like coverage wise, like I was still kind of lost. A lot of the kids nowadays are like pretty familiar with standard coverages, and going beyond that for a high school kid, you talk about over and under fronts and their attachments to coverages, and what are some of the things that they can kind of pick out for themselves, to piece together kind of a structured way to go about their business. Because I think a lot of times it's easy to be like, hey, they're playing 3D because I see the corners, eyes inside and they're bailing immediately. But like, there's so much more that goes into it. And I think a lot of high school coaches don't get enough credit because I've seen some of this. I mean, some of them, sure, are pretty vanilla, but at times it can get relatively creative. Maybe a few things beyond coverages high school kids should really try to get a good understanding of.
Yeah, I mean, I have a decent understanding after helping coach at Severian for the past 2 years. Now, I'm not like I told him like I just want to help the quarterback, so I coach Will Wood on Mondays and Tuesdays, and basically I'm doing individual and watching 7-on-7 in team. And if I see something, I say something, but that's really it. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. At Hasselback was the one who's like, all right, Henry's gone. You got to take over. I'm like, dude, I just got done playing for 15 years. You had a little bit of a head start before you got into coaching. So I'm always shocked because I'm like, I would just run double post till the cows come home because the safeties sit at like 12 yards. And if you have a fast receiver, I would just play action and throw it deep every single play because I really never see anybody get any deeper than like 15 yards. But I digress. For me, I do it in levels. So the first thing, and this is because of the system I played in and because I had to make the mic point on every single play, I had to know what the front was. That would basically tell me where the mic was. And then so I would always work my way up. The first thing I'm looking at, and usually by the time you get to the line of scrimmage and guys are putting their hands on the line, the nose is going to declare where he's at. And so now all of a sudden I know if it's an under and over. So during that week of preparation, they're playing under. That's only 25% of the time. And when they do it, it's blitz. So like now, light bulbs are going off in my head. Anticipate this. It may not be. You can't read the signals and then close your eyes and run the play. You still got to see what they do. But for me, it always started with the front, which then led me to the linebackers. Is in an under, we called it an under Tom, where they would shift to the strong side and the Sam would be on the ball, or is an over or is an under where all three linebackers are off the ball. Now I'm thinking coverage. So all of those little keys, and then you get to the secondary. And for me, honestly, I very rarely ever looked at corners. The only time I was peeking at corners was to see if I had a hitch off there, if he was pressing or if he was off. Because to me, the corners can do the most things up until the ball snapped and lie to you. They can lie their asses off. They can press and bail, and you can't snap the ball and be looking at them like this. So for me, everything started with the safeties, and it always started with the boundary safety. Because to me, if he's there, and let's just say he's like in a cover 4 alignment, 12 yards off the ball, a little bit. If he shoots to the back half, all right, I know that side's cover 2 of some sort. Now I can, as I'm looking through the middle of the field, to the other safety go to cover 2? All right, it's cover 2. What's my progression tell me versus cover 2? By the time I hit the back of my drop, I know where I'm going. If I watch him and now he drops down, it's some type of middle field closed. All right, well, now this is not cheating, but I would say very rarely did we run plays that were man plays into zone coverages based on how we did formation or shifts or whatever it was. So, I usually knew if it was man or zone, and now all I had to see was it 2 high man or was it 1 high man? So those are all things you can do when you're reading those safeties. One of them, they're both going to do something. If they just stay there, I'm thinking, all right, it's cover 4. Or maybe this safety is trying to stay there and make it think it's cover 4, but the guys, now I confirm it, and the other guy's going back to the middle. Now I'm in 3 deep of some sort. So it's all how you're taught. For me, that's how I did it, just to keep consistent, because you can't see everybody at once. And who's the one guy that's going to give me some information as the ball snapped? I always thought it was the boundary safety.
Yeah. You talk about man zone indicators. What were some things that you guys did pre-snap to indicate that? And then for high school kids, What can they, some
Yeah.
tips for that on how to
Sometimes I
recognize.
forget, like in high school, they'll play man, and you put the tight end out there, and they don't care. They just play man
No,
with the
yeah, they just play. Yeah,
corner. I'm like, well, that's that was one of our go tos, and it helped when you had Gronk, right? Because you throw Gronk out there, and the corner stays out. You pretty much knew it was zone because they weren't going to play Gronk in man with a zone with a corner. They were going to play Gronk in zone with the corner. So that was like as soon as we broke the huddle, I saw the front. I looked at Rob. Who's covering Rob? Is it a safety? All right, it's probably cover one. Is it a linebacker? Well, maybe they're doubling Rob with a linebacker and a safety over top, or they're playing two man, or sometimes we call it like one robber, where the linebacker would cover the tight end, the safety would drop down and take the linebacker's role. So it's all process of elimination. You guys are all here in New England, so the guy I played with the most of the position was James White. How many times did we start James White out and empty?
yeah.
Well, that was all that was to tell us what they were doing. If they put a linebacker out there on him, we knew it was man. If it was a safety, it was probably blitz zero. If it was a corner, now we know it's zone. So, that you have that, you have formation where if you only have two receivers on the field and you put them over on the same side, if the corner goes over, well, now it's man coverage. So like those are all things that I think the Patriots offense does the best job out of anybody trying to give the quarterback information, and not just the quarterback. The Julian was as smart as anybody because he knew it. He knew what the indicator was. He'd be looking, so he would know. All right, I'm running this route in man, or I'm going to this play and I have man coverage. So I think there's nothing better now. When you get down to the high school level, you better make sure that that's true. You don't want to see, the linebacker go out with the running back, and all of a sudden they don't care and they're just going to play zone coverage. That's something that I haven't really dove into yet to see how relatable that is.
Yeah.
Well, I heard
I
you're
love that.
jumping
That
on the
kick.
staff a little more in depth, so
Yeah.
you'll get more used
I
to it,
got
I'm sure.
I'm
I got
trying.
one I got one for you, Brian. I saw a clip the other day. It was Gruden's podcast. I don't know how recent it
Mhm.
was, and it was he was having you go through your snap counts with all the different teams
Yeah.
you play for, and I think he may have fell in love with you a little bit there. It seemed like you really
Well, he
got
loves
him
a
going.
good snap
Oh,
like
man.
this.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. And talking pre-snap, like how important is your cadence and your snap count when it comes to exactly what we're talking about when it comes
Yeah, I
to the
mean,
pre-snap stuff?
we had a section in our playbook. I think we had like 12 different cadences, 12 different ways you could put the offense in motion. And I gave a plethora of examples for Gruden, but it's just, to me, the cadence is a weapon if you use it the right way, but it's more the whole team has to be able to do it, right? Doesn't matter how great your cadence is if your offensive line can't stay on side, so and then of course they're the ones who are like, hey, these guys are teeing off. You got to mix up the cadence. You're like, all right, let's go on hard three here. And then they jump and you're like, well, we can't do that anymore. So that's something that we would always try to work on in the off season together because it's all great when you're walking through it and it sounds good. But if your guys can't stay on side, now it's one of those ways that you're going to lose the game by going backwards instead of going forward. So we had every possible way to snap the ball. And that could even be, I mean, we had like 9 different silent cadences for when you're on the road, so they couldn't time it up and everything. So you're just getting into a level of detail that most people probably aren't very familiar with.
Can I ask you something about Gruden?
Sure.
Does he ever take a play off, or is he just John Gruden
Dude.
like 24/7?
I mean, my only interaction with Gruden as a player was when he was the commentator on Monday Night Football, and I had a few production meetings with him. And then I went out to Vegas, and the way that these guys who played for him there talked about him, you would have thought he was like the second coming. They loved this guy. And now that we get to see him on Barstool, I think everybody loves Gruden. I mean, is there anybody who doesn't love the stuff that he does, the energy that
He's
he does?
unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And, so for me, I got to know him a little bit through those guys. We texted, and then he was gracious enough to come out on the Quick Snap podcast after he was in the New England Tampa game. He was there in person. So I'm like, this is perfect. We'll get Gruden on. He had kind of talked about Drake May the year before. He's like, Drake May is going to be a stud. I'm like, perfect. You were at the game. They won. He played well. Like, come on the show. And we just crafted a relationship out of that. And so that episode you're talking about was out in San Francisco the week leading up to the Super Bowl, where I went out and did a bunch of media stuff and got to be in there with him. And I mean, he loves football. He honestly, if we wanted to do this for the next 3 hours, I could too. So I think he and I are pretty much the same as far as like talking about football and trying to figure out how to do things in certain ways and learn new things. I mean, he's all about it.
He's just infectious with energy. Like that's one of the things that I think is so important we talk about quarterback play and coaching and all, and energy as a quarterback, and we see it in our groups, and I'm sure you've seen it with Garrett. But like when a group training session, like you've thrown with Jimmy, and you know Jimmy well, and when Jimmy's there, like he's a good example of a guy who demands a certain level of energy, and like you're trying to maintain, and most of our kids are trying to stay up to his level or kind of compete with James. How important is that? Because like the way I look at it, and I think I heard it somewhere once upon a time, but it only takes one negative energy guy to really sink a ship versus it's going to take a whole group of guys to really rise one.
Yeah.
So
I
how
agree with
important is that energy tidbit? And then in terms of like our sessions, like you can see the difference. Like with some of the top guys, their best trait is not their talent; it's what they bring to the table every time they come and train.
Yeah, and that goes back to Tom. Like he never not brought it. Every day. Every day he brought it, and that was just his standard, and he was never gonna dip below the standard, and now there was other great players there too who had high standards, so it kind of to your point, I would say you need a solid on a football team, you need a solid 10 guys who are gonna set the standard and demand everybody else rise to that, and that's if you're the quarterback, you better be one of those 10 guys, and so for me, like, look, could I sit there and instruct Garrett and never send him to M2? Yeah, but you know what I want him to do? I want him to go and be in competition with all those kids that are there. And, he's got a later start from then than most of those kids because we were moving. He didn't have a chance to play football. It wasn't as appealing to him because it was his dad's job. And so I want to put him in that environment and make him rise to the level of competition around him. I think that's one of the greatest things that you do at M2 is you have all these different people. And if you're a young guy, you can see Chris Vargas who has all the offers, or you can see Peter Bork, or you can see Lucas Pro. Like that's pretty cool. You can see
Yeah.
Henry Hasselback come back. You mentioned Jim. Like there's people, if that's the route that you want to go down, you can sit there and watch them and say, what are the like that's to me one of the greatest things that I was able to do was look at the guys who were successful and be like, what makes that guy successful? You can learn so much by just being around people who do things the right way.
Yeah, it's such a good point. So important for our kids to hear. And it is cool you see when kids hang around to watch those guys. And then you can see when they're training, they're trying to emulate some of those things. So it's awesome and it rubs off of them. And that is something that we're trying to create, right? Is that culture. And it starts with the kids and they drive it. And they're doing a phenomenal job with it. Shifting gears real quick. I know we're going long here, but you're just giving us so much good knowledge that we're
I'm a
stealing as
podcaster,
much.
man. I could talk all day.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot about the mental and the emotional, but the physical obviously is a part of it too. Just talk about your philosophy on mechanics. Obviously, I mean, it's well noted with Tom Brady. If you look at year 1 in the league, the way he was throwing versus year 20, obviously he evolved in that aspect too. And then just you being around you, like one of the purest passers of the football that I've ever seen live in person. What are some of your philosophies, some things you would think about, and then just your evolution of when you started to maybe the tail end of your career on your philosophy on mechanics?
Yeah, I changed a lot over, 15 years in the NFL, 5 years in college. Like it would be unrecognizable if you put side by side like a junior year of Michigan State and my last year playing. And to me, it was being around Tom. He was very specific of arm slot, and he would have this. He would say, the ball from here should be a small J, and I want to make a C with my hand. I want to be on top of the ball. I send this to you all the time so you
Yep.
can reiterate it to my son because he sometimes puts a U and you
Yeah.
want to have a C, and a short stride, a 6-inch stride. And then, that kind of changed my release point. I always felt like I had a good front side because I was a pitcher in baseball, which you really have to have a good firm front side. So that always came naturally to me. And then I would say the majority of that after learning, that small J and the release point from Tom, elbow above shoulder, so the load goes to your shoulder, not to your elbow. People think about all these guys who throw sidearm, and I've talked to you about this before. They're not
Yeah.
really throwing sidearm. They're
Yeah.
just
They're just
dipping
tilting.
here.
Yeah.
You're tilting your shoulders, and you're throwing here. The elbow still stays above the shoulder. And then a guy who was instrumental in my fundamentals was Kyle Shanahan because he was so strict on having a base. Prior to that, I was always pretty narrow and try and would naturally take a longer stride. Even if I told myself to take a 6-inch stride, I would naturally overstride. And his obsession with the base at the quarterback position really, really helped me get to what is now I would consider the new style of throwing a football, which is more like hitting a baseball than it is throwing a baseball. It's very different. And when I combine those things that I learned with Tom, and then because every day we would do base bag drill with Kyle Shanahan and Dal Loggins, who's now the head coach at Appalachian State, that was like foundational in changing the way that I threw the football. And now all of a sudden it came a lot of torque, rotation, ground force. And so I think I got, you know, the motion refined with Tom, work with Tom House just by being lucky enough to be around Brady for all those years. And what he's taught always made a lot of sense to me because of my baseball background. So everything that he talked about, firm front side, can't move the head, all of those things came naturally to me. And then pairing that with the base and the amount of work that I put in. Kyle would make me wear turf shoes on grass. And he's like, all right, try to be narrow and overstride with those turf shoes on the grass. You can't do it. So I would wear turf shoes on grass in practice to make sure my feet were underneath me. And the reality was I had not the same, but probably even more power from throwing the football, using more of the ground force production, the rotation than I
Absolutely.
was from before, from trying to stride into it.
Was there a struggle like trying to make that transition? Because we like with our guys, we'll see, like to make, and those aren't like what you're talking about. They're not drastic changes, right? So they're not going to throw you off too much. But with our guys, like trying to make those changes at times comes a lot of struggle early on, and some kids get discouraged and then they'll kind of want to go back to their old ways. Like, did you ever end up in that position, or was it a pretty seamless continuing?
The only time I
growth?
ever struggled trying to throw a football when someone tried to change something on me, I pat the football, and I had a quarterback coach who did not want me to pat. And when I tried to throw the football without patting, I could not hit the broadside of a barn. It took all of my rhythm away.
It's a
All these
rhythmic
other
cue.
things. Yeah. All of these other things, I would say, not that I picked them up right away, but I was always a really good natural thrower, and now it was just making me better. So if anything, I never had like a moment where I felt off or I struggled. If anything, it was like, do a couple hundred reps and start to see, the benefits of it, and then just keep doing it and compounding all of that. Now there was times where Tom and I would come in, and we used to, for individual, we'd have like a tight shot on us. So we'd watch our individual to watch our throwing mechanics, see where our release is, all of those things. That was huge. I have it I can share it with you sometime, Mike, too. I have it on a thumb drive, and it's just all the close-ups of me and individual. Now it's at the end of my career, so my mechanics are pretty much, exactly what I wanted them to be, but it would have been amazing to see it from my time as a young player to what it was at the end.
Yeah. No, I think that's great for kids to hear.
Yeah, there's always look, I think that was the one thing too, like the off season with Tom Brady. I'd be like, you have the most pure throwing motion ever, and he'd still be tinkering on things. I think there's always room to improve. You can watch other guys, like if I'm Chris Vargas, I'm watching Peter Bork. If I'm Peter Bork, I'm watching Lucas Prock. Like, I'm just talking about the guys here, Dante Reno, who I did drills with. Like, you can take things from other guys. That doesn't mean you have to be them, because everybody's built differently. But I watched so much Aaron Rodgers and would mess around with trying to. Now, I will say this: you have to establish a baseline of throwing before you can do all of the things
Totally
that
agree.
the kids see Mahomes do, or Josh Allen do, or whatever it might be. Like, you better be so pure in your fundamentals before you do that. That's taking it to the next level. And so for me, I would experiment with that stuff on scout team. I'd throw no look passes. I'd do all of those things. Those are all things that you can establish. But first and foremost, I had a very good foundation of how I was going to throw the football. So, any of those kids who are listening out there, like, don't go out there and try to think you're Mahomes when you can't even do a 3-step drop and throw the ball and hit the guy in the chest. Like, there's progressions to doing those things.
Yeah. I think the Tom Brady thing is awesome, because I'll say it all the time. Like, if you look at Tom Brady in year 20, like, he's still tweaking little things every offseason. Obviously more valuable when you say it. So
definitely.
That's huge. So,
It is, though, because so many kids are like, I don't think it's a reflection of being stubborn, but I think maybe it's like a security issue where, like, it's hard to go 60 minutes in a session and suck for 60 minutes in a session, but it's because you're actively trying to fix things or optimize things. And I think that's a huge kind of coaching point.
You got to have that
is
personal
you
awareness.
gotta struggle.
I talk about it with Garrett, and he'll have a really good throw. I'm like, what'd you feel on that one? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you have to learn when you do something right and be like, what did I do right there? Well, my timing was good. I had a short stride. Like, you're not always going rep after rep. Like, there's people, I don't care if you're on a team with 4 quarterbacks, like, you're going to go. And then while you're going, like, you can think about, all right, I felt good on my front side there. When you have a shitty rep, it's the same thing. What went wrong there? Well, I opened up too soon and my arm got behind. Like, you have to have some type of self-awareness at a certain point that allows you to make those adjustments or realize, oh, I want to do that again.
Yeah, it's a
that's
massive trait in terms
Yeah.
of success. I think the self-awareness portion of it is like, it's huge because I think kids don't always think that they're better than they are, but I think that they don't want to struggle in front of other people. But to embrace that, like one of the things that I always tell the kids is you have to be okay, like having 5 or 6 like really good reps and being awful for 70 in terms of what we do early in the off season, right? Because we're altering things. But if you're just going to be, inaccurate thrower, but you're going through it at 80%, like we're too comfortable.
You're not
We
pushing
need to
yourself.
start
You
to
got to get
struggle.
outside of your comfort zone. I saw this. I don't know if you guys follow baseball at all, but Roman Anthony hit a big home run
Yeah.
the other night, and they interviewed Alex Bregman about him, and he said one of the most unique things for a guy at 21, he's not afraid to fail. He will fail over and over again so he can get better. And he's like, I've never seen a 21-year-old so confident in himself and so willing to. And it's like one of the greatest quotes of all time, right? Michael Jordan. The reason I fail, and that's the reason why I succeed. Like, you're never going to learn enough about yourself if you just take it easy and play it safe. There's just no way that you can continue to grow to where you need to get to.
Yeah. I think the being able to like dissect a rep and then, like you said, what did you feel? Like, and then the kid being able to communicate it, I think is so important because we talk about it all the time. If you can communicate and understand it as if you were coaching it and you can speak it, like you can take those mental reps, you can truly understand and start to make that mind body connection. And then that's where it really clicks for those kids. So I think to hear that is important as well. You guys got anything else, or should we hit them with the 2-minute drill to finish?
I'm ready for the 2-minute drill.
All right,
I'm
let's go.
excited. I don't know if you saw Peter go through it or
I
not,
saw it,
but
yeah.
so it's a hybrid of questions. You could
All
get
right.
football related. You could get lifestyle.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. Stej, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
Yep.
We're going to go around
This
the
is a
horn
little
here.
bit
2
more-
minutes on the clock.
2
right,
minutes
here-
on the theoretical clock.
All right. Here we
Mike,
go.
you start it.
All right, Brian. Give us an example of one of your longest play calls in one of your systems.
Okay. Z shift to gun, target right, 64, F Pluto read, alert Tar Heel, kill tornado, on whatever.
Absolute mouthful.
3 plays in one.
I love it.
Wild.
All right.
The other
Garrett
one, like
won-
West Coast would be way longer, but I can't even remember that shit anymore. I put that out of my head.
All right. Garrett comes to you and says, Dad, I want to study one active NFL player or one active NFL quarterback right now. Who's the guy you're naming?
Drake May. That's an easy one. 2 years ago would have been Josh Allen, but now it's Drake May.
Hell yeah.
Keeping it house.
I like that. Favorite NFL stadium to play in?
Ooh,
Besides Gillette.
Denver
Besides
or
Gillette.
besides Gillette, away stadium. God, that's hard because I want to go to the old one like Arrowhead or Lambeau, but some of these new stadiums are crazy. Playing in Vegas.
I was gonna say, yeah.
That is. Sometimes I drive in there and I'd be like, how did humans even create this? So we'll go Lambeau and then we'll go Vegas.
Best defensive player you ever faced?
Darrell Revis. No, Stephon Gilmore.
Favorite food?
Steak.
Pre-game playlist. Number one song on the playlist before a game.
I didn't listen to music.
Oh,
No.
I
David
know.
Goggins.
I just didn't. I felt like it distracted me from what I needed to be ready for.
Toughest throw to make for a quarterback?
20-yard comeback.
Hardest hit you ever took?
Brian Cushing, right in the face. Real men played football, and there was none of these weak calls. I was just telling someone about this the other day. Our rookie running back was responsible for the Mike linebacker, like the simplest thing. And Cushing came roaring through, and he just free released right by him, and I threw the football, and he hit me right here. And I definitely got a concussion, but I stayed in the game because that was when Johnny Manziel was my backup, and I was like, if I come out, I don't know if I'll ever go back in. So Cushing hit me, and then he was my teammate the next year, and God,
I was gonna say,
that was a brutal hit.
Cushing was one of my, like, when I was a younger kid, like the mic'd up with Brian Cushing,
Yeah.
like that was just
Hitting the helmet on his face.
Favorite receiver you've ever gotten to play with, throw to?
Randy Moss.
Hell yeah.
Your favorite NFL moment?
Honestly, this might be a shock to you because I didn't really have anything to do with it, but beating Kansas City in the AFC Championship game in 2018.
David
My
Andrews.
One of the
favorite
best games ever.
individual moment was having a 28-3 comeback long before the Patriots did it. Well, when I was the quarterback at the Cleveland Browns, we were down 28-3, came
I
back
heard
and won
you
on the road.
talking about that. That's awesome.
Yep.
The
I
originator
know
of the
favorite
28-3.
moment was beating, just that feeling of the team versus everybody else in that moment was unbelievable.
I will say this.
First-
I'm going
Oh,
to
go ahead,
chime in
Steven.
real quick. That 2018 AFC Championship game when we sealed the deal and David Andrews waved to the crowd out after that last touchdown. That might be my favorite Patriots moment to date. He is the
I'll let him
friggin'
know.
man. Oh, he's my favorite. He is my favorite.
That's awesome. All right. First interaction with Tom Brady.
He came up and introduced me and just said, "Hi, I'm Tom Brady." And that was probably like OTAs, rookie year.
Favorite route to throw.
Favorite route to throw, post, deep post. Mike saw me throw a few of those.
Yeah. Launch them.
Against
the
a high
moon.
school safety.
Oh my God. I throw 78 touchdowns.
When people look back on your legacy, what do you want them to say about you?
Just resiliency. I mean, to be undrafted, cut, bench, just keep fighting back. I think that's, if Garrett, ever looks back on my career, that's the one thing I hope that he learns from me is just adversity is going to come. How can you be resilient?
Yeah. Kind of ties into mine. But I was going to say, one piece of advice you can give a kid in high school kind of trying to navigate the recruiting process right now.
Ask a lot of questions, lean on people who've gone through the process and don't get caught up in like the hoopla. Like if you're good enough, I mean, Josh Allen was a 0-star recruit, had to go to a community college. I was a 4-star recruit on one website, a 3-star recruit on the other. And I think I've seen somewhere like the majority of 5-star recruits don't even end up being starters in the NFL. So it doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you finish. And if you're good enough, it'll work out.
Last one for me. I've been following you a ton lately with what you're doing with the podcast and media, and this has been unbelievable. But in regards to that, what's next for Brian Hoyer? Like, what's the next 5-10 years look like for you?
Just continue to build the media stuff. I don't want to do too much that prevents me from being around my kids and their athletics and their opportunities. So I got 7 more years until my daughter goes off to college. So I'll continue to do the things that allow me to be around and help coach at Xaverian. And at that point, I don't know. I mean, if the media stuff's going well, then continue to do that. If coaching is there, I actually got offered to be a quarterback coach for an NFL team this year, and I turned it down. I won't say what team, but I just am not ready to do that yet. So
Now, in that situation, can you just pass forward any names like Mike McCarthy, Stefano D'Amelia?
they wanted the reason that I got called is because the coach said I definitely want to have a former player because I do believe, and we're all unique. Like there's nothing like being the guy behind the offensive line trying to throw the football. And if you haven't played that position, you can't imagine what that feels like either.
Well, I always thought like meeting you and just your story and being on 9 different teams and all those different systems and your knowledge and what you learned from everyone you were around, like you were a perfect candidate for that. So I'm not surprised that came up. That's nothing that you want to chase. That's not
Not
in the
yet.
future.
Not yet. No,
Yeah.
I'll focus on Xaverian for right now. See if I'm even
Cool.
worthy of being a quarterback coach in the NFL.
You got a pretty good pipeline. It's a pretty
Yeah.
good pipeline over there.
Yeah.
Three-peat. No, well, that's it for me, Brian. I just want to say thank you, like, for you to take all this time and share all that knowledge. I know kids, not just our kids, but kids across the country are going to get so much out of it. So just really thankful for everything that you've helped do with our program and to be around the last couple of years. It's been invaluable for us. So we just really appreciate it.
Yeah,
No, thanks for having me
Brian.
on, and I look to continue to be a part of it. I know you and I have talked about doing some off-field stuff, having me run some of the
Absolutely.
high school kids and trying to get them prepared for the mental and emotional side of it. So we'll continue to explore that and maybe get some of that stuff going this summer.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe
We're
another
always-
showdown appearance.
Yeah. High
I
school
mean,
this
I'll
time.
Get you back.
See if anyone wants to challenge me in the throwing competition.
There we go.
Let's
You heard it
go.
here first, guys.
Let's go.